All right, welcome everyone to Smash University. Today, on another episode of Coach's Corner, we're going to be going over Glutonny and Wario in the metagame. So, usually we talk about characters. I think this time we're going to be talking about a character plus the top representation of that character for the last three games, which is Glutonny. And I think we have a really good cast coming through here. Obviously, Ramses lives in Europe, right? So you kind of know the
Yeah.
advantages and disadvantages of living in Europe. And we also have Snorly and Tony joining us today. Snorly, an expert in Wario, and has also helped out Gluto as well in terms of just like Wario as well. So I think we got a really wide variety of information from all of us today. And I guess we can start off by talking about just Gluto in general. So I know Glutonny from Brawl. I know a lot of us started off during the Brawl days watching all the European combo videos, and Wario was a pretty good character in Brawl. Bottom of top tier or top of high tier, I think most people would have put Wario
Yeah.
in for Brawl, and that's pretty solid. I don't know if it was like it was like almost solid enough to win a tournament, but there's a bunch of characters that could do really messed up grab releases on Wario. Like if being a
hmm
high tier in Ultimate, it's like, oh yeah, you can probably win a tournament, right? But like being a high tier in Brawl was like, oh, I don't. It's like if you weren't like
I
the top like
remember
5 or 7 characters, you're probably not doing it, right? In
I
Brawl.
remember when Wario was considered C tier in Brawl, and there was a SoCal player Fuse who was the only Wario who mattered.
Yeah, I remember that.
So
I remember. And then
yeah,
we
that
got
character was
Fiction,
hard.
who
Fiction,
now
yeah,
is really good at melee.
yeah, yeah.
But back then he would just like time people out with Wario and Brawl. It was it's
Mhm.
crazy. The heel turn.
Bring back the tire. The tire was
Oh
the tire
god, the
was great.
tires were too much.
So yeah, I mean, now and then Gluto was an amazing player in Brawl, and then I don't even know. It's like, did was Gluto able to come out and compete? I don't know if he was the best Brawl Wario. That I don't know too much in that sense. I just knew he was like the best Wario in Europe, but I don't know if he ever got a chance to compete in Brawl. I don't even
Yeah,
know
he
like
came out.
how
He
old
came
he
out
was
to
and
a
stuff.
Northeast Atlantic event. I'm trying to remember if he came out to two or if he just came out to one,
Okay,
and he didn't do well. But you need to remember that he was also like 13 years old.
right, yeah,
So
he was really
Yeah.
young.
yeah,
Okay,
I
13
think
years
he
old on jet lag is very unreasonable tournament
yeah.
conditions to
I,
judge someone's career off
I
of.
think he ended up losing to Makos Lucas at the end
oh,
even.
Makos, yeah.
Yeah, which was like super like even back then, like the European scene kind of had a lack of matchup experience. So you could see like Glutonny got really big in Brawl when he beat Ally, when Ally came over to Europe. So like, as Glutonny in his element playing against Snake, everyone knew the Snake matchup in Brawl. And then you play against Lucas and it just all goes out the window. It's kind of crazy in that regard.
I don't know much of his ball history, but I did know that he entered, I believe, one of the SKTAR
Okay,
Yeah.
back then, and he ended up playing somebody in the Captain Falcon outfit in a money match, and it was a known money match at the time. Like it was a DDD.
oh dang.
I'm
It
from
was Adamus.
yeah, Adamus.
Adamus?
That's what it
Ah,
was.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I saw that on YouTube and I thought it was funny. I know more from the Smash 4 era, so watching those ball videos definitely like blow your mind, see how young people were playing.
Yeah, Brawl was definitely a different era. You can even just watch like combo videos with Glutonny in it. Like I don't know what it was, especially like early Smash 4 and then Brawl. It was like the YouTube meta for Smash for some reason was combo videos. It was super sick.
Yeah.
And then it kind of pivoted out of that. Like even like there's GSM combo videos, DMG combo videos, right, for Brawl and Smash 4 and all that. So and obviously a bunch of others. But Snorly, I want to hear your like. So did you play Wario in Smash 4 as well, Snorly?
Yes, I
Okay,
did.
okay. So you,
Unfortunately,
unfortunately, yes, that character was probably, I mean,
Not good.
hands down
Yeah.
his worst game.
yeah,
But Gluto stuck with the character in
yeah,
Smash 4 and still was able to pull out some pretty good wins, to my knowledge, right?
yeah.
He did, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
He did switch to Cloud a little bit later in the game as sort of like a backup character, because the meta was kind of outgrowing Wario. Like all the DLCs were bad for Wario, but he definitely like I mean he still performed at a really high level. He kind of had a rough time in Europe because we had a lot of Sonics in the top,
Oh
and
man.
Sonic Wario still a bad matchup to this day. But in Smash 4 it was even worse.
from what I've learned from him in Smash 4, from talking to him, was that he was always on the fence on whether it was Wario or himself, because even a character as Bayonetta, as we know, who was like the best character in Smash 4, he would play the Bayos and he would do well, and he would say he thinks Wario does well, and I'm like, I think the US Bayos like were a lot better because we had Lima, Captain Zack, all the big names. But even after he played, I think Lima at one tournament when he came here for one of the glitch, he lost, I think 2-1 or 3-1. And I asked him, does that change his opinion of the matchup? And he said, no. He said he's just not used to that specific playstyle because nobody plays Bayo like that over there. He think that if he were to be here, he would actually be beating Bayo consistently with Wario, despite admitting that Wario was a bad character in that game, which kind of blew my mind.
It's
Because
crazy.
I think Bayo definitely beat Wario in Smash 4. I don't think that was a debate at all.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like frame 4 anti-air. Like it when you bring
Yeah.
in anti-air to the discussion for Wario, obviously a character thrives in the air. So it's like for me there's Tweek and Gluto are they're the two extremes of both sides of the coin. Like Tweek pretty
Yeah.
much like does not believe in the character at all. And then Gluto, I feel like believes in the character a little bit too much, to the point where like he won't put in his own like skill factor into it, right? Like, oh, maybe I'm
That
just
is
like
100% facts.
right, like
That is
maybe Gluto is
correct.
just playing the game like a lot better than them that day, or just that match, or maybe he's just a
Yeah.
better player in general, right? And then he kind of like, I feel like he gauges too much of the matchup on like his own individual play instead of the character's tools, and like just because like you can still win matchups that are bad, right? But I mean, and then right, so it's like both sides of the
think
coin. It's really hard.
Yeah, I think the hard thing to discern is how much of it is the skill factor, because you can say that, hey, Glutonny is outplaying his opponent, but at the same time you can say that Wario gets more reward in this game, at least, out of outplaying the opponent compared to a lot of other characters. So you can say like, hey, the matchup is like bad if we both play like optimally and we just pick the right options and we never get hard red, but if we add like a little bit of human error to it, like Wario gets insanely good, right? That's where our Wario gets good, is when you add the human error. And I think in that sense, I think it's kind of hard to say if he believes in Wario too much, because like look at him, like for example against Kome, right? Shulk against Wario. Like I play Shulk, I've played that matchup. I think Shulk does relatively well in the matchup. You negate a lot of his combos, keep him out. You can run the clock with him because you have arts, right? But Glutonny in his matchup chart, he put Shulk as a winning matchup, and like, can I
Yeah.
blame him? He beat Kome, right? So
Three
like in that
times
sense,
too
yeah, he
to
beat
add to
Kome
that.
3 times. That's crazy. And at that point, I'm like, okay, so maybe on paper, right? Shulk has all these tools, and I've seen them in practice. But if you play in the way that Gluto does, where you don't really focus on playing optimally as much. I mean, Glutonny still plays pretty optimally, right? But it's not like his focus is not to play like the cleanest Wario in the world, the same way like Tweek tries to do. Maybe you kind of like need that little bit of focus on just outplaying someone to make the character shine. And then the question is, do you factor that into the character strength or not? And I personally believe you should. Whereas I feel like Tweek looks at the game way more from a perspective of, and I could be wrong about this, but this is the impression I get. I think he looks at the game way more from a perspective of, hey, if I pick the optimal option every single time, do I win? And then you get two characters like Joker, Wolf, that type of stuff.
Right, right. Tweek is definitely more of the on paper kind of player, and I haven't talked to Gluto much about the game, but just from like what I'm hearing, Gluto sounds like almost the opposite of that, where it's like, well, on paper, yes, but I am challenging humans. I can get the opening, and one thing to me, the biggest difference between Tweek and Gluto's Wario is when Gluto gets a hit, he like really makes it count. Like I'm sorry, like Tweek's Wario doesn't hit like Gluto's in terms of like literally on hit, right? Like on
No
hit
Wario in the world
in
hits
the
like
world,
Ludo's
right? Right, like
Wario.
there's literally like Gluto specific combos that like I've
Yeah.
never seen other Warriors do, right? And it's just like, and he's like pulling it off in tournament, he's pulling it off consistently. Like Glutonny, like even if you watch Gluto streams and stuff, he'll do like specific like footstool stuff, or like really like weird interactions with Waft, or like certain types of moves with other characters' moves, and you're like, what the fuck, like that works like that or whatever, and you can just tell this is a solo Wario main for like over a decade through multiple games, right? So yeah, I think that's like the biggest difference, and yeah, it definitely makes sense, right? Gluto is, and to that point, Gluto is just playing to the strength of the character, because that's what Wario is, right? Like you have the high air mobility, you have the waft, and essentially for the most part, if you can't make that waft count, then what is Wario doing? It becomes a much harder match for Wario if you can't make the Waft count, right?
So what I think that Gluto does significantly differently from Tweek is he tends to look at the game in such a way that he tends to be very cautious at the start of any given game. Like he very rarely rushes people down at the start. And it probably looks like he does because he's using poke tools that are minus on hit. And so he's essentially using things like Wario Fair, like a melee or Brawl Falco laser. So he's trying to lock people down, not to hit them, but so that he can acquire enough information so that he can make reads. And so one of the big things that Gluto does that almost no one else in the world does, or rather I should say does as well as he does, is he tends to specifically get people's DI patterns down pat. So he has like a kind of like a mental map of how the opponent is going to hold their controller and how they're going to adjust how they're holding their controller. And so he acts almost like he has perfect information once he starts touching someone. And so you're going to see him looking forward into that. And then the other major thing that he does that you don't really see players do a lot at top level is Wario specific. And that is he likes to weave a lot in the air. And generally what you're going to have when you have a character in there is you're going to have like a cone, like a V-shaped cone. And the characters can have max drift. And then if they have any kind of mix up there, then it has to be a special based mix up. Otherwise, they just can't decelerate and then re-accelerate in order to make like a Z shape or anything like that.
Oh, you mean a
Wario,
cone as in like where he can land?
Yeah, like
Okay.
max drift
Yeah,
this
yeah, yeah.
direction versus
I
like
see.
your potential max.
Right.
Right.
Like
So
Wario's at
most
the tip
char-
of the triangle, and like he can like go. This is max drift in, max drift
Yeah.
out, and then everything in between.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Wario can actually make like a Z shape in the air from a full hop. And he is one of the very few characters who can. And he is also probably the only one who isn't floaty. And so generally we don't see this at top level because the characters that can do that tend not to be the strongest characters in the game. There's like Yoshi,
Jigglypuff,
etc. Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are that it makes a very niche, strong tool for Wario, and it's something that Glutonny has been using since Brawl because it was one of the best things you could be doing in Brawl is things like using cross-up air dodges or neutral air dodges in the ground, things like that.
That's just an approach. That's just an approach.
It is an approach, but he does
Yeah.
it. He does it in Ultimate, and he pulls it off. It works at every level of the game, and you don't see other top players doing that very often because it's like, well, why would I jump and air dodge into my opponent? And it's because both Tweek and Gluto, but Gluto especially, essentially use the character like aerial walking. So he uses his drift to kind of act like he's going to attack, and then he drifts back. And then sometimes he'll act like he's retreating, and then when they go to chase his landing, he'll just drift back in and just air dodge through and just catch them up. And it's the same way most characters would like roll in on reaction to you trying to jump in with an attack. And Gluto is just the master of using the grounded anti-airs while he's in the air. And it really compensates for Wario's weakness of not having the reach and not having the disjoints to compete with top meta threats. Every other character at this level is like a sword character, pretty much. Wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing what you can kind of see. I'm sorry for interrupting you. I'm gonna make a quick
No, you're
point.
That was passing on the torch.
I think the thing that you can kind of see in Glutonny's performances as well is that it like how well he does skills very much by how well he understands his opponents. And then we kind of go back to like the player versus player thing, right? So if you want to use like the aerial walking, if we just like aerial footsies, whatever you want to call it, like a lot of that is understanding when your opponent wants to press certain buttons. Because at the end of the day, it's bait and punish, right? It's just bait and punish. But bait and punish also leaves you very vulnerable, especially in the air, because you don't have like a frame one escape option to press in case things go wrong. And that's something that, especially in like his more recent performances in the US, you can kind of see some of that go less well for him because he cannot figure his opponent out fast enough, or he doesn't adjust his play fast enough, and he kind of relies on this like bait and punish play style. But if his opponents if the opponent that he plays does the research into how Glutonny likes to bait and punish in the air, it's just a pattern that you can predict, just like Glutonny can predict the opponent, right? And that's kind of like a weakness that I think Wario has. Is that he, like, if you have more information on the Wario player than vice versa, like the degree to which that gives you an advantage is way higher than against other characters, I think.
To bring back an old point, because it stuck in my mind. First of all, I love the fact that the way you guys analyze the game is actually like right on point a lot with the player, especially. So it's amazing hearing you guys talk about that because I haven't heard that in a while. But I wanted to say that when we were talking about Bluto's optimism and what he sees in Wario, a lot of it, although it's optimism, he doesn't believe that he can do anything that Wario cannot do, which is kind of a good way to see it because of adding to what Tony said with the the way Wario moves in the air, right, with the Z shape and everything.
Right.
It creates all these options in the sense of that, like, okay, at any point against any character, I should be able to weave out and whiff punish this, whiff punish that, win this interaction, win that. And when it comes to Wario, adding to what Ramses said with the reward factor is, like, for example, since you said choke earlier, if I weave in a choke 4 there, holding forward, I should be able to drift back in and get my landing forward there, which leads into the up throw up air, etc. And if he's retreating, then I don't have to commit as much because I'm charging off. So like, although it's pure optimism, it makes sense the way he explains it. And when you try to compare him to, like, and you try to add the player skill and you ask him, he'll just tell you that, like, other people just don't use Wario properly and that Wario can do these things and people just don't believe in it. Which he's not wrong for believing in when you think about it.
Right.
Right.
And I
Makes
think,
sense.
yeah, and I think believing in your character is a very important thing. That's why even just like for me when I coached Tweek, it was very like Wario was like a very touchy subject because it's like even if whether the character is good or bad or they're right or you're wrong or whatever, right? Like at the end of the day, if you don't believe in the character you're playing, that's not good because you need every ounce of confidence when you go into bracket. And if you in the back of your head are thinking like, "Oh my God, dude, fucking Wario, so shitty," like that's not good, right? That is not good because if you're down bad, like emotionally, or if you're getting frustrated, like that will not help you, right? Like if you're down a stock and you don't think your character's bullshit, like you're not you that like if you're down a stock and if you're like if I'm playing Wolf and I'm down a stock and it's like, all right, realistically all I gotta do just bullshit him with down smash or do this, like if you don't believe in your character's win cons being like really strong or broken, that's gonna be less confidence for you if you don't believe in that, right? So
Yeah.
I think it's really good that Gluto does believe in it, and it's hard because when I think of Gluto and I think of Tweek, and they're both their Warriors. One thing that comes to mind is I think like generally I think Gluto is stronger in he's like a better air to air Wario. He's also like he hits harder, right? Like his punish game's better. But I think what Tweek is better at, and this like it's hard to say like Gluto is for sure the best like solo main Wario, and it was like kind of a debate when because like Tweek wouldn't use Wario in every matchup, right? And then when they dittoed, like Tweek won, but the ditto doesn't really matter to say who's like the best overall Wario. Like the best overall Wario is definitely Gluto, but Tweek's Wario when he was maining him, especially in the early meta, like to me what stood out was how he played on the ground. Like Tweek would be very patient on the
Yeah.
ground, and because the way Tweek views the game is like, oh well, this character has anti-airs. Like it is very risky for me. Like yes, I can drift back and whiff punish a Shulk fair, but I have to be like perfectly drifting back, be right outside
Yeah.
of like you can do it. Don't get me wrong, you can do it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's like the
That's an
risk
outplay.
reward. Right, that is a huge
Yeah.
outplay, right?
That's a huge outplay.
So for Tweek, it's like you
So
can go for that air drift, or you can stay grounded. And then Tweek, especially after the nerfs, like it nerfed Wario's grounded options, right? So now even like Tweek like believes even less in the character because the way Tweek plays the character is like, okay, like you can scrap air to air, but if I can somehow position underneath you and get the sour hit up tilt with intangible hands and anti-air you, right? Then all of a sudden I have the wafts, so or the waft confirmed. So it's like to me those are the two biggest like differences in playstyles and strengths for both of those like
Agree.
Wario
Yeah.
players. And yeah.
It's kind of funny because I feel like Tweek has been, or not Tweek, Gluto has been trying to be more grounded lately. If you look at his
Yeah.
set against Chag, he actually lost against Chag at main stage, I think it was. And then he played Chag at, I think it was an invitational in Mexico. And he actually did really well against Chag. And if you look at the VODs, the biggest difference between the two matches is how grounded Glutonny was. So in that sense, like, I actually think that proves your point, Charles, in that like Tweek was better at doing it and it actually made him stronger in a lot of aspects because we can see that like after all that time Glutonny is taking after those traits and trying to adapt that for his own playstyle, so makes a lot of sense.
So Snorly would know better than me if Gluto had adapted it, but I think I actually had given Gluto some notes on Chag. Was that for the Mexican Invitational set, Snorly?
I think that was after.
Okay, that was after. Okay.
That was after. I wanted to add on to that also because when that question came about, was a better Wario or whatever, even early on, you could ask Gluto, and for the same reason that Charles mentioned, he used to say that Tweek was a better Wario because at the end of the day, Smash is a game of neutral interaction. And if you compare Tweek, because of Gluto's reward, he would win neutral, let's say twice, sometimes even once, and ended up taking the stock. But Tweek would win neutral 5, 6 times against the opponent, even though they're both using the same character. And Gluto watching that learned a lot from it, especially with the ground game, because you realize, okay, maybe I don't need to jump as much. Like, I don't have to be in a rush, in a hurry to get that starter. So, for that reason, he always wanted Tweek to keep playing Wario so he could learn from that aspect of the game more. And I was hoping that in return, Tweek would learn, the Gluto reward more so they could, it's like two half of the same coin, and they would be like the complete Wario.
Right.
It's like Vegito, right? It's like
Yeah,
Goku and
yeah,
Vegeta.
exactly. Yeah, pretty much.
That's so funny.
When he played that set with Chag, I'm glad that he adapted really well because he realized that that's one issue he had in the past with the Buzz also. A lot of characters just stop Sora from jumping entirely. And that's why he used to use the Buzz a lot when the Buzz was using Rosalina. Because what the Buzz would do is use Luma on the ground, force you to jump, and once you commit to the jumping and you're out of resources, Rosalina Nair or any aerial that she did at the time, or back air, which was relatively safe, it just covered that whole entire area while retreating, and worst case scenario, I either win or we're back in neutral. And over time, he's learned to realize that a lot of these matchups, he could stay grounded, and you'll see Gluto go for more dash grab up throw upper, even if he overshoots it sometime. I think he did a little bit against Mutace, if you saw that set also. And things along those lines. And he's gotten better at the ground game, like pretty much by doing those things.
Well, the speaking of preemptively covering the jumps, almost everyone he's really struggled with in North America is they really come down to characters that are capable of safely and consistently covering a jump, either because they have long hitboxes or they just have very big drift.
Cool,
usually, in the case of Jigglypuff, bigger drift than Wario. So against like Tilde's Falco, you saw him go for like nairs and such. And one of the broken things about Falco is that he has so many reasonably safe multi-hits that he can anti-air and then still convert that into a safe ground retreat. Whereas usually you have to choose high or low, and then characters like Falco and Jigglypuff can go for both, depending on how they drift it. Something you wanted to say, Ramses?
No, I was listening. I think it's an interesting point. I think it's a very interesting point. I actually have a question because something that Snorly said a while back caught my eye or caught my ear. You were talking about in some interactions, Glutonny could just like the choke thing you said, right? Huh? He said like if choke drifts in, you often get a whiff punish. If he drifts out, well, we kind of go back to neutral and the Waft keeps charging. One thing that I'm noticing from basically every Wario is that camping for Waft is not really done, as in this game at least. What do you think about that?
I think that may have happened mostly because Warriors realized early on that half Waff is like way better than full Waff, even before the nerf. Half Waff was a frame 5 punish, which was insane for like even drop shield. Like to give you an idea, when Game & Watch does down air key on people's shield?
Right.
Pre-patch, you were able to drop shield and half off that, like on reaction. which was
Okay.
an insane punish.
That's
That's why
crazy.
Kabendo was so good at landing the jump off out of shield.
Mhm.
Because like he would just wait for it, and it was like pretty much almost as fast as Nair got a shield, you know. So over time, Wario realized that like okay, from damn my voice going away, from playing neutral, like you're gonna get half off within the 1 minute mark, but by then, you're better off playing neutral early on, and by the time you get that opportunity to land the half off, you can land it. Because if you wait for full off, it's almost twice as long. You get the super armor, and the combo starters didn't work as much with full off. Also,
Right.
that's why you see a lot of people start fishing for falling up air, or they'll go for like the off stage full offs. Because I think now after the nerf, it's a frame 12 move
Mhm.
from 9 originally, which is
Yeah.
a big difference.
It's a lot slower. A lot harder to get the confirms. But yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like it kind of makes sense too because Wario can be like an early starter. He has a lot of early percent combos, and in a lot of ways, and this is actually like a funny point that I want to give a little bit more nuance, but like just on surface level, he's a close quarter fighter, right? Kind of like Ryu and Ken. He wants to get in your face, and then he has good frame data. He has like a really safe down tilt for no reason because he's an aerial character. He has his Nair combo starter, which up until recently was quite a menace. Like Tony has said before, forward air to lock people down. So like his up close fighting is pretty good. His grab confirms are insane. He has a command grab on top of that, one that beats spot dodges. Hello. So in that sense, like I kind of get, trying to get into your opponent's face, and at the very least, trying to interact is going to give you that information that you can later in the set use to convert into combos. So it makes sense. I still feel like there are like a lot of matchups in which Wario wants to play more campy than we see a lot of the Warriors play currently.
I agree with that. I think that's the medium that Warriors try to find, or at least the ones that are thinking about it, is like which matchup do you choose to just kind of be a little bit more pressure aggressive since you're so good up close, and then you get more information from your opponent that way, or which matchups do you just sit back and some matchups even you're better off holding the full off without even thinking about using it because based on the character you're playing against, it might be easier to get a combo on it. Like Fox and Falcon, for example, they fall extremely fast. So you'll see Gluto get more jab blocks on them or falling up until full off would work forever on these characters.
Right.
So you can see in those matchups, you're better off just holding it because one, they're more scared of you. They could die. The recovery is a little bit worse, like by a landslide. Finding that medium as I think why Wario, I guess, could be considered a hard character. I mean, I think he is because of how much he lets you do. So, like, I mean, that freedom is always like hard to pick. Like too many options sometimes can be a bad one. I guess a bad thing.
It depends, right? Because if all your options are very strong, it becomes a lot of the difficulty goes away. Like it's something like Mithra, right? Run up down tilt, run up forward tilt, like they're very similar in use. But for Wario, he has like a lot of options, and all of them are like they don't cover a lot of options on the opponent's end. So you have to pick the right option for the right situation. So I definitely feel like he's a bit of a harder character. Yeah.
Well, plus too, the waft is like there's a sense of regret when you whiff it, right? Like with Mithra, it's like, oh, it's not like I start the game with 20 down tilts. I'm only allowed 20 down tilts. Like it's a limited number or whatever, right? Like with Wario,
I wish.
there's only so much time in the round, like quite literally, right? Like time is a resource for Wario in multiple senses of like you have the lead. It's also like the timer for your waft. Obviously, you can eat like tires and stuff to speed it up by like a second or so, but like essentially it's like this, it's a huge risk reward in a sense where like even if you go for a waft confirm and you miss it by like a singular frame and they squeeze in the air dodge, like all of a sudden you're like shit, now I gotta like hit the bear, now I gotta hit the down tilt dash attack. Like this is all of a sudden a really different game because my character's so front loaded in a sense where I need to get the opening, I need to make it count, and I need to either get a shit ton of damage or I need to get these stocks with these wafts, right? Because I don't like Wario's mid-range is all in one aspect, and it's his air drift. And if you have something that shuts down the air drift, like it's like, oh, I'm Palu, and like, oh, you're air drifting, like run up nair, like what do you do?
Yep.
It's like you can whiff punish it, but you have to like hard read when and where, like how they're gonna nair. Like if is it like a full in dash? Is it like a dash short hop nair drift back? Is it short hop nair drift forward? Short hop nair drift down? Are they gonna fast fall the nair afterwards to try and drag you down? Like they're like that to me, Paulus just seems such a hard matchup because any matchup where Wario, not necessarily forced to be grounded, but like you have to be very careful in the air. You have to like almost over respect your opponent in the air. That's where it gets rough. And yeah, I guess we can close off the Gluto discussion. I know we talked a little bit about Wario, but essentially at the moment with Gluto and Ultimate, like I want Gluto to do really well. Like especially like the first Evo we had, and it was like Gluto top 3. You know, like for me, I've been a fan of Gluto ever since Brawl, and like watching him kind of struggle in this current meta seems kind of rough. And I'm glad that he's starting to play more grounded and like starting to figure that out. Because it's even at Smash World Tour he lost to Tilde, and I was so surprised. Like because Gluto does well versus like Spaceys in general. You know, even like
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
against a character like Wolf who like commands the air, kind of like in a Palu sense, where like his nair is just so big. I've seen Gluto shit on Wolf, right? And
Oh
like to
yeah.
me, it was so surprising that Tilde did so well versus him. But Falco is a character where it's like you command the air, but you don't necessarily do it air to air. You do it more from ground to air, and like
Yeah.
up tilt's very hard to whiff punish, right? So, because I believe Tweek actually fought Tilde in tournament. I was talking to him with Wario, and
Yeah. Well,
he beat Tilde with Wario. But that's more so just the fact of like Tweek kind of like being more understanding of that ground game kind of sense, right? Where he's not really trying to contest these anti airs that like he fears so much, because on paper anti airs like destroy Wario, right? So, like,
I'm glad you said that because obviously matchup unfamiliarity aside, like with Gluto and Tilde, that change of pace is what caught him off guard, like you said, from the ground to the air, like with Falco. That's why when you look at it, if you were to compare both of them, another aspect you could think of is like if they were both were to go into matchups they don't know, Tweek would always do better, like off rip the first
because he's
time.
playing on the back foot, I
But
feel. Like from the
huh?
like, well, when Tweek like first fights a matchup that he's unfamiliar with, like he's like more of the back foot player, right? Like, oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
start the match on the back foot. I'm getting Waft. Like I don't know what you do, and I'm
exactly.
gonna gather information before I make any kind of commitment,
Yeah,
right?
he'll get it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. Because like if they go into these matches that they don't know, Tweek would be the one to do better off rip because he'll wait till he gathers enough information to where he's comfortable. Which sometimes he waits too long, which is
Right.
that's a player thing.
Hmm.
But yeah, at the other end, if Gluto knows a matchup really well, he'll do better than Tweek would do in set matchup, like he does against the Wolves
Yeah.
and those. Yeah, Falcon and Roy's. It's usually stuff like that.
This might be a whole new can of worms, but I'm interested in hearing your take, Charles, because I have a point I want to make. So you're from Hawaii and
Right.
basically, from a different scene than the US. What do you think is the best way for a weaker scene to keep up with a stronger scene? What do you think the players need the most to compensate for the gap in skill?
You have to. Okay, so the biggest thing is so like from my I me and Void, or like we competed in Brawl, but we started like traveling during Smash 4, and
Right.
um I went to Genesis 3, and I like I should have 2-0'd MVD, but like I ran off fared like an idiot when I was at 0% against his Luigi, and like he dropped from the ledge and cycloned. Like he couldn't even do the mash. Like he just cyclone
Okay.
traded me, and then he beat me game 3, right?
The
Like
MVD
I was
Luigi.
I didn't even know he
yes.
was
And like I had a
The
Luigi from Hawaii,
legendary.
so I was like ready for
Oh,
it. Like
okay.
I was up
Yeah.
a whole
Okay.
100% on him. Like, but to my point, I could compete. Like at first year of Smash 4, I could compete with PGR level players. And then I remember the first time I traveled out to SoCal, there was like I'm not gonna name the players, but there's these players that weren't PR'd in SoCal, right? Like a year and a half later, and like I played them in friendlies, I was like destroying them, right? Year and a half later, I come back and I'm traveling out to like another Evo or whatever. I usually like boot camped in SoCal before I went to Evo, just hang out with Void or whatever, right? And then like these same players that I just totally destroyed were just completely shitting on me. Like I felt so, and like this is me when I was like competing in Smash 4. I built my own training regimen. I played a lot. I grinded a lot, but it was all with the same people, right? And then SoCal, I mean back then, especially Smash 4, you got to think of all the sagas that were happening, all the locals that were going down. Like these guys were going to locals every single day. Almost every weekend or every other weekend they got like majors. Everyone's flying to them, right? And like it makes sense why they could smoke me, right? But it's like in terms of opportunity and just the amount of like different player, like the player pool you're playing, that I think that's a really big underrated thing, because even if your scene has strong players, you are not exercising your adaptivity muscle. If you like, if
Yeah.
there's, you know, like let's say I like in the Hawaii PR, you know, we had top 10, right? Top 10, pretty competitive players, right? But I know my exact strategy every time I go in against every single one of these players. It's not like I'm just challenging like just a completely, I've never met this guy. Okay, he plays Yoshi. Like, I know nothing. Boom, go start. I only know stuff about Yoshi. What does this person like? And you got to do it quick, right? So I think that's the hardest thing, and we're kind of seeing Gluto suffer from that, in my opinion,
Yep.
right now. Because like,
Yeah.
okay, like never played against Falco Tilde, right? Like, and it's so hard to essentially close the gap. It, like me and
When you
White
only get
moved.
to play these
Like
players.
to me, the answer is you got to move.
So
But
yeah,
like,
I think
that's the easy answer, right? But,
I think the point, like, if you're in a weaker region, you need to understand the game better. That's all you can do, because like when Glutonny came to the US, he figured out like, hey, these players know how to beat Nair, and I'm not ready for how they're beating Nair. But like, he could have been ready. He knows more about Wario than his opponents. He knows more about Wario than people in Europe. What, like, he could have sat down and be like, okay, I'm relying on this move. Like, what can people do about my strategy? But he didn't, and that's kind of like a flaw that you see in some players. And this is not like, you know, this is not necessarily like something they do wrong. It's more like a natural consequence of how we're taught to learn. Like, people take results as truth. So when Glutonny plays in Europe and he does well, he's like, okay, what I'm doing works. No need to fix it. But then
Yeah,
you go
that's
to
what I
the
was gonna
US,
say, yeah.
exactly, and then you go to the US, and then people like beat things, and you don't know how to beat it. And for Glutonny, so Glutonny is the type of player who prefers to just like experience things, and then he understands them very well. He actually understands them very deeply, in my
Yeah.
opinion. But he needs to experience it, and that is where like Europe is probably not a great place for him to be, because experience is like the main thing Europe lacks. But if you compare
Yeah.
that to a player like well, like me, for example, like I'm also in like a region that lacks experience, but I can make up for it with understanding. So the other day, Flo, who's like a French top player, came over to grind in the Netherlands, and the reason I did well against him, even though I don't have a lot of Roy experience, is because I've kind of like figured out like, hey, what are the things about this character that I suffer from? What can I do about my moves? And then I'm ready to adapt. And of course, it takes a little while to adjust, but I have like a plan ready that I can iterate on. That's going to help you. And I think that's what a lot of Europeans are missing, because, well, the reason why they don't have understanding is because they never needed it. And that's what you guys were getting at, where you said, like, hey, Gluto, you know, like, he's going into every match with a plan ready. And that's where I feel like the US kind of screws him over, because in a lot of ways, he kind of loses the confidence in that plan, is something that I'm noticing. Is that when he goes into a game in Europe, he kind of goes into it with the confidence of, you know, I'm the best in Europe. I can outplay everyone. But when he gets to the US, it's kind of like, I need to adapt to your meta. And when he starts from like that mentality, I think that really puts a hamper on the way he wants to play.
I think Go ahead, Snorly.
Okay, I was going to say that it's very hard to change your mentality that way. I do agree with what you're saying, because a lot of these things can only be experienced, you know? Like, for example, I'm pretty sure you guys have seen Mars and how he covers aerial, like, while fading back with Zerad, forcing you to jump and stuff like that. Something like that. Like, I've talked to him about it. Even if you explain it to someone, even if they go into the game knowing it, until it happens to them, they won't understand, you know? Like you said, in the US, they got better at punishing their own shield. He's played some people who did punish it and some people who didn't, and it's very hard to know, okay, like, how to stop it until it happens to you and you're playing it over and over again. And I think to the fact that you also said that he's a very more experience-based player, so he'd rather go over there as often as possible to keep experiencing it. Because it's very hard to anticipate, like, these options that you already figured, or, like, I don't want to say foolproof, but, like, worked, to just randomly stop working.
But
when you know the other warriors over there aren't doing it the way you are too.
My opinion is that is where, like, help comes in. So like a coach can figure that shit out for you. Like a Wario that knows how that works can figure that out for you. Oh, you're laughing because
that's how we became friends. It's literally because of that specific. It started with Smash 4 when he lost the day. I don't know if you remember. He went to Genesis. He lost the day at Smash 4. And I helped him with that. And then I remember even when he went back to Europe, he was playing against, I think his name is Homika,
Yeah,
Rosalina
Rosalina.
Luma.
Yeah.
He played him in the winners final set, and he won 3-2. But even though he won because he was a better player, I was watching the set, and I randomly DM'd him, and I was like, listen, you're overthinking this over Rosa. All you have to do is, because all he's waiting for is to jump, and he's up and doing reaction. I told him, start beating his counter to your jump with MT a short hop into ops, like to force Rosa to commit first, and then you could just react with Warrior 4 there. And I also told him that back throw got rid of Luma instantly because of the Warrior spin, something with the Warrior spins. And right after I told him that, from Winners Finals to Grands, he went from 3-2 him to 3-0 him. And then he messaged you back and he said, thank you. And usually, I'm pretty sure you guys know as coaches, when you give people advice, they don't apply things directly, right?
Yeah.
Like, so for me, it was just a friend saying like, "Hey, you should do this differently," and then he came back and he's like, "Oh yeah, thanks. Like that was the best thing I heard in a while." Like and you're like, "How do you adapt this fast?" Like, and that's something like he's really good at also adapting like instantly, from half game to like hear 1 or 2 cents, and he'll just straight up learn. So if you combine like the little bit of help he could get with the experience, if he gets the experience with the help, I think he'll end up. I mean, I believe in him, so I think he'll end up becoming probably the best player in the game.
I still think like if you live in Europe or like a weaker region, the best thing you can do is like focus on understanding. Even though you're right in that like if you experience something, you discover aspects of the experience that you couldn't theorize. That's just how Smash is. Like theory is like it's almost never 100% complete. But it's a really good basis to work off of. And something that I always tell all my students is like if you start off with an idea, then you can iterate. But if you just do something because it works, it's very hard to change it because you don't have a reason, right? So if it's like I'm using Nair because blah blah blah, then it's a lot harder to replace it with other tools when you understand why it's no longer working. So for example, for Glutonny, right? A lot of the reasons why his Nair keeps getting punished is because when people are in that range, they're like, I'll just shield, and in that scenario, I can still get punished, but at least I won't get 0 to death by Nair. And if the Nair comes out, I can parry it and kind of go from there. Very very strong thing to do against Wario. Like you can make use of that in a lot of different ways, like landing up airs, down tilt pressure, dash in, dash out, stuff like that. All works, but you gotta know why you press Nair to first understand what the opportunity cost is. And when you understand the opportunity cost, you can develop strategies that kind of like complete the whole game plan, so to say.
Yeah.
So my perspective on this, to go back to what Ramses originally said involving going ahead and planning ahead of time, generally when I am teaching someone for a foundational lesson, in terms of this is how you want to learn it initially, the initial acquisition of a concept is generally something I want to have redundancy with. So instead of just teaching people, oh yeah, you want to go in with Nair, this is going to be your bread and butter, this is going to be something that comes up in every single matchup, go ahead and usually challenge people to just kind of think critically about what other ways would you have to go ahead and apply the same level of pressure for these same habits. Like what are the openings you're looking for to get the Nair, and what other things can you use there? And in Glutonny's case, this is something that he could have planned ahead for, like Ramsey said. However, you can't just go back and say, oh yeah, well now that I know that, I'm suddenly going to just triple my knowledge of these small situations. So essentially what you have to do at that point is you have to go back to the basics, except I think this bridges into Wario nicely because I am skeptical of how much redundancy Wario has. So Wario has a lot of powerful tools, but they don't tend to do the same things as each other.
That's exactly what we talked about when we talked about Wario being hard. He has like a lot of tools that are very specific and they don't have a lot of overlap, so you have to find the exact right tool for the exact right situation. Totally agree. Right. Totally agree. Yep. Yeah.
So it's just a matter of like when we are looking at, well, how is Wario, like where is Wario and how is he supposed to change to adapt to this meta? Because obviously Wario rises and falls with Glutonny's performance since the patch.
Yeah.
It ultimately comes down to, well, what is Glutonny supposed to be doing? What is Wario supposed to be doing to deal with these positions? And that's where Wario's tools tend to struggle. It's It's not a matter of, oh, well, I know people are going to just try and parry my Nair, so I guess I can just wait for them to parry the second hit of Nair, and then I'll just up air. Except Wario's up air is so slow. Rather, Wario's short hop fast fall is so much slower than the second hit of Rising Nair.
You cover both.
Yeah, you can cover both.
Yeah.
So Wario is a lot more limited in that. What Wario does have that Glutonny doesn't use so much is grounded movement, like we said before. So he is starting to mix that into his game and apply it. However, it's a matter of going forward, he needs to go ahead and learn from how he reached this current little point of stagnation. I can't even really call it stagnation. In terms of results, it appears to be him falling off. I want to be clear, Glutonny has not fallen off. It's just a matter of results. It's a temporary blip in time. He's one of the most consistent players in the world. So what we want to see from him is to go ahead and learn from how he got to this point where he's running into all these complexities of the game and running into a brick wall. And so going forward, he needs to learn that he needs to also learn not just to climb over the wall, but hey, could I maybe go through this certain weak spot in the wall? Or, oh, hey, can I just walk around it? Or, oh, hey, can I dig under this wall? And actually just think deeper about small encounters going forward. That he's used to being able to kind of take the easy way through and just power through most levels of play.
Outplay the opponent, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and now that he is having to look at players who can handle him, he needs to think of it, well, how would a bad Wario player handle this? And think of it that way.
Yeah, and so one thing I want to add to as well, it's like I feel like Glutonny kind of brute forced his way via experience, right? Because that was the best way for him to learn. But with COVID, right, it kind of shut that option down. And then everyone was grinding Wi-Fi, and then even offline came back, and then like he was having visa issues, right, and stuff like that. So it's like his main way of learning, and this is like not even his fault, right? Like it's like, oh, this is the way I learn, and this is why, in my opinion, even like pre-COVID, he was just clearly a top 5 player. Even just in general, in my opinion, he's still a top 5 player. I still hold him to that.
I agree.
Skill level.
I also feel that way.
But with COVID, it kind of like shut down his main resource and his best way of learning, which is via experience, right? So I think for Gluto right now, his best course of action is he has to. Now he's able to go and compete again, but like there's this like somewhat of a gap, not like skill gap, but more of just like kind of catching up to the current meta because he didn't experience. Yeah, there's a meta gap, right? Because he didn't experience it, and it's like I can tell when I watch him play. It's like, okay, he's just like he's still playing like from a year or so ago or whatever, like before COVID, right? So he's adapting to the new meta, and I think one way to compensate the lack of experience, because this is something me and Void have to deal with, right? It's like, oh, okay, we are coming from an area with a lack of experience, and in Smash 4 there was more options to deal with this because the game, in my opinion, had more depth in terms of tech, right? So it's like, oh, Perfect Pivot came out. Oh, 80% of the community thinks it's garbage. Me and Void looked at that and we were like, oh shit, like we could grind this. We can grind this. It's broken. Everyone thinks it's trash, and people are not going to be ready when you hit them once with Sheik and you perfect pivot combo them to like death or whatever, right? Like this is a curveball we can use, and we can use it to compensate lack of experience. There's not too much options like that in Ultimate anymore because of the strip of tech, where it's like, oh, I can just outgrind my opponent and like outuse this tech to like outweigh their experience, right? So I think having a game plan or just like studying more in a sense, right? Or even like getting a coach, right, for Gluto, because I feel like for Gluto, if you give him like general goals in a matchup, like, oh, hey, like the Rosalina thing, right? Hey, like just avoid getting like your jumps called out. Like these are the general things you want to avoid, and these are the general things you want to do. And like if you can just plant that seed within Gluto, it can kind of like not necessarily give him experience, but like he doesn't have to experience it like throughout the first couple games and see like, oh yeah, I generally don't want to do this and I generally do want to do this, right? If you can kind of like, you can skip that phase of the adaptation if you kind of catch him up via like, oh hey, like you want to do this, you want to avoid this, and I'm not a Wario expert by any means, so I wouldn't be able to do that. But like someone like Snorly, who like understands and has experienced this or even studied, like there, because the thing about Wario too is there, it was especially like year 1 or 2, very popular character, and even with the nerfs, even if you don't see like as much Wario nowadays, a lot of the matchups still like apply the same way, right? You just have to like compensate for the nerfs, but like neutral's still going to be played generally the same way. So even just having someone like Snorly or Ramses like just help you out, right? In terms of just like having a general game plan, like it doesn't even have to be super elaborate, but just getting that first step there, right? So it's like okay, after that we kind of like okay, say this is the bar he has to fill, right? And like he's just trying to do it via experience. If you can fill the bar halfway up with just like
It's huge.
pre-knowledge, and then from there Gluto's experience like comes in and like okay, with the experience I already know this, like build off of that. I think Gluto can shoot back up like as fast as possible. But right now he's in like the sticky situation where the lack of experience is hurting him, and that's because he learns via experience, right?
It kind of sucks to be in Europe as an experienced learner because I feel like um the like you said yourself, COVID has kind of reduced what you get out of just grinding the game, and through that you get more like in in relative terms you get more out of just understanding the game. And in that sense, in Europe there just isn't a lot of focus on understanding. I actually made a video on this a few weeks back, and more about, like I said, results. Right, that's how we learn. Like you get a 7 in school or 7 out of 10. I don't know what you use grades. An A in school. We use numbers. You guys use letters. You get an A in school. You're like, I did it well. I did it right. I did well. And in Europe, it's kind of the same way. Like, oh, I beat this player. I must be doing well. And I feel like that really hinders the growth of the entire community, because it means that you can only learn through experiencing something, when that's just not a reliable way to improve in the environment. And even in America or in Japan, whatever region you think is better, I don't think that's a viable method to learn even all like at top level. Because at top level, like experience alone is not going to be enough. You need to understand a lot about what is going on so that you can make those micro improvements that differentiate a player like Spargo or MK Leo, right? Like number one, number two. Like the difference there is in the minute details, and the only way you get better at the minute details is by it through understanding. So I think in that sense, like everyone would do better to focus more on understanding, but especially weaker regions, I think.
I had a couple of things I wanted to add. I don't fully agree with the side of I do understand that Gluto mostly learned from experience, but I feel like people don't give him his thought process enough credit because I think he actually got better since quarantine started. Like you could see it probably like the way he goes to more footstool now. He's more confident in them, like because he's gotten more aware of like situations in general of how he could like take advantage of things. Um, so the one thing I wanted to add, I feel like he's at the point, or at least from my perspective, where he feels like he could think about these situations over and over again. Because I've seen him watch and break down Meister's sets from when he lost, from when Tweek won, and etc. And he'll map out those situations, but a lot of these things you can't fully prove them out until you're back in those situations.
Right.
And like you said, with the European gap, it's very hard to test these out when you're there for like one specific weekend. You play that one person where you might lose or even barely win. You might not play them for another 6 months again because the next time you come, they might not even be on your side of bracket. So it's very hard, even if you theorize that or even learn that information, to go back to it and say that like this will work on that specific person, over and over again. And the other question I had for Charles was he did say that the meta change and that Bluto had to play catch up. I wanted to ask how do you think the meta change? Like on what scale, and like what do you think change about the meta that would have to make, I guess, a Wario adapt?
I think the
Like if
biggest
that makes
thing
sense.
for the Wario meta is like because of the nerfs, there's not much like less people are committing to the character, right? So now, because like now Tweek's not playing the character, or like even before the nerfs, Tweek wasn't playing. But like I feel like as time goes
Yeah.
on, less people are committing to Wario. So now Gluto has even more things to figure out by himself. He was already kind of like on the forefront of figuring like practically everything
Yeah, I
out,
was just
or
gonna say
almost
I feel like he
everything out.
figured out.
Right,
Yeah.
right, but like, and I definitely still give him that credit. But like, even like some of the small things he could learn from like Tweek, or you know what I mean, or maybe some like Wario Lab Rats or yourself, right? Just giving him that little bit more perspective to push the Wario meta more. But so many other characters, their metas got pushed way, way farther, right? Like when year one of Ultimate, did you ever have to worry about a Jigglypuff? Fuck no, you didn't. Did you ever have to worry about a Falco? Fuck no, you didn't. Now, like we're in year 3 of the game. These characters that like, because year 1 of Ultimate, everyone thought that this was going to be the same shit. There's going to be 10 characters that are good. Everyone else is going to suck,
Yeah.
right? Like, that's the
True.
usual thing of every Smash game. But after a year or two, everyone was like, holy shit, every character is like pretty solid, and like it's like worth, like you can commit to a mid tier or a high tier, and maybe you won't win everything, but you can definitely fuck some people up. You know what I'm saying? Like you can
Yeah.
cause
Yeah.
a lot of upsets. You can get top 8, top 32, like with a good range of characters. I think like half the cast can get like top 32, if
Yeah.
not more. You know what I'm saying?
Patches help.
Right.
At that point, at what point do you blame the player or the character? Because I did talk to him a little bit, for example, since you mentioned Jigglypuff. I know he's speaking generally,
Right.
but I think it's easier if we go with more precision. I asked him like what changed after, because he was up 2-0 on base page before he got reversed 3-0'd.
Right.
And if you watch the ending of game 3, he did a falling up air, and instead of going for Waft, he side beat because he misinputted, which would have killed Jigglypuff at 50. So it was definitely like what a set that he was on the path to winning.
Right.
And when I did ask him, he said that like he was mad that he lost game 3 because of the WAF. So he just held it after that, and he was autopiloting, and then like basically obviously took advantage of that, being the good player that he is. So like adding to what you said, at what point is it like the character to blame or the player? Because that also plays in part to his optimism about the character, because he knows that like it wasn't the character that made him lose that set. It was just him change of mindset.
I think
Like
I
simply,
think the base
Yeah.
base mage is not the best example. I think if you want to look at like the meta changing in a way that's less favorable for Wario, you're better off looking at like Cola or Shuton or even Chag. And I think what you can see from that level of play, those players, is that they are way more punishing when they find you in a bad situation. And I think Wario, trying to do his aerial footsie thing, finds himself in bad situations more in neutral than most characters. And what you can see in the meta nowadays is that like those small mistakes get punished way harder or with way more pressure than they used to, especially compared to Europe, where people don't even know what a bad situation is, as far as I'm aware. Sorry, Europe. Point being, like Wario cannot get away with looking for things in neutral, and that's what Tony was saying, which I agree with wholeheartedly. Is like he needs to start looking at like ground game way more often, because on the ground, like you can do similar things, but it puts you in way less of a bad situation if it goes wrong. Whereas in the air, you're way more vulnerable to getting pressured for not finding what you want to find and somehow having to disengage, and then Chag runs up to you and now you have to deal with Nair, and because you have to deal with Nair, you burn a resource, and now you're in the air without, you get what I'm saying? And the same happened against Shuton, it happened against Chag, it happened against Cola, it happened a lot against Cola. Holy moly. And that's just like what I think the meta, what I think hurt Glutonny the most in terms of meta shift is that people have just gotten so good at punishing bad situations. And that's what I think he needs to adapt to most.
Yeah. And I also think Wario in general, the first like year or so of the meta, we weren't as campy. Like everyone is willing
True.
to camp very, very hard, and a lot of players have gotten really good at abusing if their character has a very broken air-to-air tool, like Palu Nair, Mithra Nair, like Aegis. I think like dismantles Wario, in my opinion. I just think that character has it's so hard to get in, like but I mean, aside from that, like
I agree.
right now, like the two best players play that character, right? So it's like something you kind of have to talk about. But I just think a lot of players have gotten really good at avoiding waft setups. Like if Wario's in the air, like you hold shield and you will not get wafted. Like they can grab you, they can bite you, right? But like the 50-50 mix up with Wario to me was, he can set you up with Waft in the air, and sour up tilt is the grounded option, right? So it's like, is he going for the air one or is he going for the ground one? Or is he going to go like, Tomahawk, grab me, put me in the air, now I have to respect the grounded option, anti-air one, with the intangible arms, right? Like just straight up anti-air. And that thing, since that thing got hit, you can now like pivot your focus around, okay, I just don't get hit by the air setups. You can still technically get hit by the up
Yeah.
tilt, but it's way, way harder to do it. Now, am
Harder,
I
yeah.
saying is Wario not good enough for Gluto to win a major with? Absolutely not. I think Wario is still a good enough character, but do I think Wario is top tier? I don't think Wario is like, I'm like,
Fair.
I think he's top. If he's in my top tier, he's like 20ish, around like 15 to 20. Like I'd put him in the same area as Fox. Like I don't
It's
think
like
Fox is
music
like
to my ears,
completely
by the way.
overwhelming, but like I think they're good enough top tiers. And
Okay.
like I just think that the player base has gotten better at playing against Wario. Stacked on top of the nerfs doesn't help. That's like my general opinion of, because I definitely don't think it's the player. I think Gluto is an amazing player, and right now, and like he can go any path he wants to. I don't even think I'm not even on the boat of like Gluto has to find a pocket or he has to switch characters. I think Gluto can win with Wario. He's an amazing player. Wario is for sure good enough. It's not like Wario is trash, right? I definitely think how good Wario was before to how good Wario now is like there's a pretty decent gap, right? Like we used to see Wario's in top 8 like all the freaking time, right? And like so it's I think it's
That's how
you know,
I feel.
yeah,
My
I just
opinion
think
is a
it's the
little bit
lacking
closer to
pieces.
yours, but he doesn't think so at all, which is kind of crazy to me. He actually think the nurse barely affected Wario, if at all. So
I mean
he
I
tends to
respect his
pit a lot
opinion.
of the things.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
it
it's
for him
goes
if
back to the whole
he
optimism thing.
yeah, and I mean he knows Wario. So
Yeah,
like if he
exactly.
honestly believes that, then like I'm not gonna be like Gluto is wrong. Oh my god, like
Yeah,
Well, it makes sense because like you look at Wario from like a little bit more of the Tweek perspective. It feels like where like you can sit back, play grounded, gather information, and Glutonny being in the air all the time like probably values up tilt a little bit less than you do, right? Because you talk about like the air setup, the ground setup. I don't like how often do you see Glutonny legitimately hit an anti-air up tilt into Waft even
up to
pre-patch?
yeah,
It didn't happen a lot. He got his Waft through Nair combos. That's or up airs, right?
oh,
So like
yeah, falling
in that
uppers.
sense,
Yeah,
I get where Glutonny is coming from. And so my take is that the nerfs did hurt Wario, but Glutonny is only going to start feeling them when he's going to start adapting his playstyle, like Tony said, to be more
on
of
the
a grounded
ground.
one.
Yeah, I could see that.
So something that is probably going to sound wrong at first
I'm ready. I'm
hearing
ready.
is so we're accustomed to seeing Glutonny get very strong punishes, as we mentioned multiple times. And so looking at Glutonny's Wario, you could be forgiven for saying, yeah, Wario has a really strong punish game. But in terms of his ability to actually lock down positions, actually really force people to not be able to do something once they reach a certain point in the game, like he can't keep you on the ledge indefinitely, things like that. Uh, I think what you're going to find is that people who aren't specifically Glutonny are going to have very inconsistent punishes. And this is compounded by his reliance on Waft. So I think that there's this misconception that Wario is still a fully functional high tier character without Waft in the mix. And if you did not have
Yeah,
Waft, if people were not making mistakes while playing around Waft, things like that, I think you would come to find that Wario has a very inconsistent punish game. It's not very strong. It's similar to what we see in the other can't kill characters like Wolf, where they do have strong kill power moves. They just don't have any ways to force you into those moves. And
yeah,
so typically what you have Glutonny doing is he's compensating for these weaknesses through sheer skill. But if you look at other Wario players, you'll see them just struggling. They don't struggle to get hits, they just struggle to get meaningful hits. And what
yeah,
this really comes down to is the relationship between punish game and neutral game. And generally, if your punishes aren't coming from your neutral tools, the safe things that you're doing, then you're either stopping and increasing your risk in order to get these higher reward tools, or you are just straight up closing out your own game plan and your opponent basically is winning when you decide to start going for kills. And I think that's starting to hit Glutonny now, is Wario's impositions. So I think that it's kind of like threading a needle in terms of where you see it. As long as he gets the thread through the needle eye, we're not going to notice it. But if he gets just a little bit
yeah.
flustered, gets a little bit tilted, all of a sudden, this small little difficulty is going to add up in a very big way. and you get reverse 3-0'd by Jigglypuff.
I totally agree with everything you said, by the way. That was like on point, like to the T.
I get what you're saying, Tony, but I think the dynamic that you're talking about is something that every character suffers from to some degree, though. And I think the hard thing to judge is how much, because here's the thing, right? I think this is the dynamic. The dynamic you're talking about is that like every character has things they would love to do, right? Like your ideal punches. But if the opponent plays around them well, they're not going to get them, right? If you play around Roy's ideal punches well, he's generally not going to get them. Then the character has some sort of like plan B, some sort of like counter option that they're going to use to force you to respect it. And through that respect that they gain, they're going to get their strong hits. So you're going to respect Roy's, run up jab, for example, and then he's going to use that respect to run up grab you. Now his grab is not scary, but if you get grabbed 20 times in a row, you're going to stop shielding, and then he's going to run up and jab you. Now the dynamic for most characters is that like their plan B is not as great as their plan A for most top tiers at least, but it's good enough to still be a solid plan. And I think what you're saying is for Wario, his plan B is kind of subpar. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the dynamic that Wario has to make up for that is that one, his plan A is extremely strong. So he gets to capitalize on a weak plan B and still keep up when he finds that one strong hit. And the other part is like Wario's disadvantage is absolutely insanely broken, in my opinion. Like he has the airspeed, really good recovery, a really heavy character,
Small.
multiple, yeah, exactly. So overall, like he has room for error, so he can rely on his weaker game plan without losing the game to it, which is something that, for example, Sephiroth cannot rely on as much because he's super light. And then on the other hand, his plan A is so strong that when he does hit it, he gets a lot out of it. And there's other characters that have the same like dynamic, like for example Sephiroth or a Shulk, who's like if you force Sephiroth and Shulk on the ground, they're going to be a lot weaker. But then when you start playing around their ground game, their aerial game opens up so much. And personally, I think Wario has the tools to rely on a weaker plan B and still win the game in the current meta. It's just that I don't think Glutonny has his plan B developed because his plan A destroys the entire region that he's in. That's my take.
Yeah, I mean, you
Hey,
like
from
know
the
Gluto really well, so yeah, I get that. Yeah, sorry about that, Snorly.
No, don't. No.
okay, I was just adding the fact that I think the nerfs even if Gluto doesn't feel that like it doesn't affect Wario directly, right? Because of like Ramses is because of how he plays more airborne. I think the fear that people had with Wario affected the nerf a lot because even if people didn't fully know how Wario work or when up tilt work, like their thought process changes when Wario either misses Waft or when he has it and they're at a certain percent. Because people used to be like, okay, at this percent, these three things probably will kill me. Now they're like, okay, only up air will probably kill me,
Do not get
and
hit
that
by
little bit of confidence, yeah, alone, like so people are like, okay, as long as I dodge up air, I don't have to know what the character can do, even though he might be able to dare me across the stage or get the landing hit of Nair 2 only, which would still work. But people don't know that, but they'll just tell themselves as long as I don't have up air to get hit by, then I should be fine against Wario. And I think that boost of confidence also with the nerf helps people do better in the long run against Wario too.
And I think
That makes
this is
sense.
something that Tweek did a lot, not even in this game. I think Tweek likes characters that that have a really strong plan A, but the plan B is like pretty good, but like not amazing. And you saw Tweek abuse this with Smash 4 Donkey Kong and Smash 4 Cloud. He would have limit, he would grab the shit out of you. He's playing Donkey Kong. You're at 60%, and he's just back airing the living fuck out of you. Like he's just back airing, up airing you. He literally doesn't even grab you like the rest of the game, and he just fucks you up and hits you, right? And this is that Tweek loves it when he gets free conditioning. Diddy Banana in hand, free conditioning.
Right.
So it's like these extremely like volatile, like strong plan A's, and I think Ramses was like kind of spot on it in a sense where like when I watch Gluto play, he's still like trying to go for these falling up airs and stuff like that. And it's like it's year 3. Like I don't think you're gonna catch anyone slipping on a
He's
falling up
basically
air.
trying to like adjust his plan A in minor ways to brute force it anyway, instead of just
Right.
changing the strategy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's very on point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think with like because Wario still has solid ways, and like for me, this is like the same thought process I had about Fox. So like I thought Fox was this like total dog shit. I was like, this character sucks. Like I can't believe people think he's good. Blah blah blah. And like now, like especially at around when quarantine started or a little bit before quarantine, I was like, you know what? Started switching from Wolf to Fox, and I started believing in the character. I was like, okay, like I started learning and understanding more. Like I stopped like trapping my thought process like Smash 4, like, oh, I don't have Smash 4 tool X, Y, and Z anymore, right? Like, and more so just thinking about the character, right? So it's like, okay, Fox, you have broken neutral and you force shield, but you can't get anything out of it, is what my thought process was before. But you keep grabbing them, you keep doing damage, and then you can force another win condition no matter what. Like, you can shield versus Fox, but no matter what, he'll grab you and he'll force you into the corner where you get backered, or you're going to be in the air where he can shark you with up airs. Those two things are like guaranteed off grab. There's no character that can get out of it. Like you, and even if you can plank, it doesn't matter because Fox will stand by ledge and let you plank and like come back up on the stage, and you're gonna be in the corner and you're gonna have to hold this back air pressure, right? And if I hit you, you're dead. And if not, like I can either grab you, get more damage, and put you in the exact same situation, or up throw you and try to shark with up air, right? So because Fox's plan B links into an eventual win con, you can still like use that to
Exactly.
or you can get the Nair up smash and blow him up at 80, right? Like that's cool too. But like it's very important that your character has like a strong A and a winnable B, and I think Wario has both of those. Probably a little bit more volatile than Fox, like a very stronger A, but not as a great as option as B. But Wario still has like down tilt dash attack. You can still hit the back air with the drift, right? Like they're harder to do, but and I think Gluto can find himself in a position. And like I said, even I think there's a lot of characters that are just good enough. Like we don't even have to throw around numbers. I don't give a fuck if Wario's like top this, top that. Like in my opinion, Wario is good enough.
Top 90 at least.
Yes, top 90 at least. Like, I know that Gluto can win with Wario. Now, would it be interesting if Gluto picked up a pocket? Maybe started experimenting with pocket. I know, like I've seen him play Joker, Wolf before. That could be interesting too. But I think it's very hard to get a player that has mained a character for over a decade to kind of switch, and especially when the character is like really good in the game. Like Wario, like I don't know. This might be Wario's best game.
I've been trying him to go Wolf against Olimar for the longest. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh yeah.
It's
Wolf. Wolf's a great character. I'm a strong believer in Wolf. A lot of
I am not, unfortunately.
You're not?
But
see, some people think he's falling off. I still think the character has like room to grow. That's a whole other topic though. But Wario, I think Wario is definitely good enough, especially for someone like Gluto that's as strong as him. I just think he needs to work on that, like the plan B, because I think Gluto executes plan A so well. Well, like he just executed plan A so well, and him hard executing plan A worked for him for the first 2 years of Ultimate. Like he was so damn good at it, and he caught on to the game so quick that like he would execute plan A like to the T, and it was like always fun to watch. And you know what I'm saying? But now I think people are understanding the counterplay against said plan, like the plan A of Wario, and he needs to start working on that plan B. At least because like when you start plan Bing someone, then you can like start hitting plan A again, because they're trying to like you there's got to be something to cycle back and forth. Yes, you got to have some kind of cycle, because if you put all of your chips on plan A and your opponent's like very clearly playing around plan A, you're not going to get it, or you shouldn't get it if they're executing correctly, right?
I wanted to ask you, since you're on that topic, do you think the inconsistencies with Wario's punishes are part of the reason why his plan B can be so lacking sometimes, or
yes. My biggest thing with Wario, and I really was hoping that they would fix this,
like Nair not working.
Is Nair not working? Yeah, Nair not working, and I've talked to Tweek about it a lot. You can all the other things about Wario doesn't even bother Tweek.
It's
the lack of range, like he hates when a move is inconsistent. When like he hits something, he wants to like know for sure that he can like go for.
That he's getting that reward.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like there's certain like scrawny characters like Palu that falls out of Nair. That's like the combo that Gluto got on Arrow was fucking insane because Nair like barely ever works against Palu. So the fact that he like, that's how I know, like in turn, like Gluto's knowledge of Nair is a lot more than Tweek's, because I mean he just plays the character more and he understands the punish game. But so like maybe like Nair is inconsistent to Tweek, but I don't know how Gluto feels about Nair. Maybe Gluto feels like Nair is pretty consistent because he knows so much about the move. But like, even
Like,
then,
he knows it's not consistent, but it's not on Tweek's level. Like Tweek really hates Nair. I think like Tweek played Apollo one time. He got Nair back for whiffing the second hit of Nair. It took 60. I don't think that was the last time he played Wario for a while. And I couldn't even be mad at him because I was just like, I
That's
mean,
true.
yeah,
like,
because
you know,
to Tweek, it's like I won neutral and I took 60 damage. This character, like, what the fuck?
yeah, exactly. Like, so that's why I can't even, like, when it happens, I'm just like, yeah, Tweek's gonna drop Wario again. I don't blame him.
So yeah, if I wish they fixed it, but I mean it is what it is. It's still a really good move. You just have to know when it's not going to work, right? That's
When
why
it's not, yeah.
that's why when Gluto plays against Palu, he knows not to go for a 2-hit nair. He goes for hard hit. He goes for nair hard hit one fastball
and a retreat, yeah.
yes, like
Right.
Dash grab and stuff,
knows
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So like since he knows what characters nair doesn't work for, he knows what kind of nairs to go for against what characters, right? Whereas
Correct.
Then you kind of go back to the idea of like Wario having a lot of tools that are strong in specific situations, and then you kind of go
Extremely
back to like
specific.
the character is legitimately one of the hardest to play in the game, in my opinion.
yeah, you have to have
I
like
agree.
incredible knowledge. There's very like character specific stuff with like a lot of your moves
Oh,
and
yeah.
stuff like that. Like
You need to know matchups too, like to a T.
mhm,
It's crazy.
because he's a punish
Yeah.
game oriented character, right? Like
Exactly.
he is
Yep.
like the I don't even want to I don't know if I want to call him the plan A character, but he's one of the plan A characters. Like in terms of just
Yeah.
like your plan A is very volatile. He's probably one of the characters in Smash that has like one of the most volatile plan A's in the game because of like
But also one of the most complicated plan A's, and that's why I feel like he can keep up with like a character like Joker. Joker is a plan B character. Like Joker's plan A is not that special, in my opinion. I think his plan A is mostly about playing around you, you know. But right, like even a character like Joker who plays around the opponent struggles with beating Wario's plan A because the plan A is just so flexible, malleable, broad. It just can do a lot of things. So in that sense, I get why Glutonny has been so focused on like, you know, oh, plan A doesn't work. Maybe it's me who's not doing the plan A well enough.
Yeah.
Maybe I should drift back for an extra frame so I can get, you know, like it's so easy to fall into that trap with Wario. And
Yep.
yeah, my hope now is just that like he kind of like snaps out of that and he starts going with like a solid backup strategy or two. That's all. I hope.
So something both Tweek and Glutonny struggle with is when the opponent refuses to interact and just says, I'm not going to play your plan A or plan B. And I think that's where Wario really suffers,
mhm.
is usually in that time when people are just kind of focusing on retreating. Like I watched the Tilda set, both the Chag, both of them, and definitely Shuton. What they like to do is they like to use an aggressive option to get near you, and then they'll move back and they'll kind of tax you along the way, put out like safe aerials to hit you if you go in. And so generally the go-to punish for that is you just take the stage control, you walk them into the corner, they run out of stage,
Yep.
and then all of a sudden you get more reward on your next interaction. And Glutonny tends to either do this very well or not at all. And he doesn't really have anything in between. So if he's not on point with it, then he'll basically just focus on baiting them into coming back in, except because they're going in as essentially a feint, like whether it's a Roy's short hop fair for Cola, and then jumping in after that to catch Glutonny's retreat, or in Tweek's case, just anybody can run away from Tweek, and it tends to do a lot of psychic damage to him. So the problem with that is that Wario's overshoots tend to be weaker than most of the meta top tiers. He can't do so safely, which is where you get like people parrying his nair because he's trying to overshoot with the nair and such. And except they don't care if he doesn't overshoot because Wario can't just come in with like a medium speed option. Like he's either there or he's not. And so I think that both of them struggle a little bit with that. Again, this all comes back down to ground game and being able to walk on the ground as well as in the air for Glutonny. For Tweek, like it doesn't matter either way. He's willing to chase people down, but once he starts chasing people in earnest, he'll get flustered. So that's more of a Tweek thing than Wario. But for Glutonny, I think that's something that he can push Wario to do a little bit better. The other big thing that I think is an issue for Glutonny is that he's still human and he still drops Waft sometimes. And like Charles said at the beginning, you only have so many wafts in a game. And so if you follow Glutonny's sets, you'll see that there are games where he just isn't going to have enough time to get another waft, and it's a close game. Maybe they'll both be at low percent because both players are camping each other, and all of a sudden Glutonny's just looking down at this matchup, and he knows, well, I'm not going to have this tool for the rest of the game. They know I'm not going to have this tool for the rest of the game to pressure around it. And I think he tends to flounder a lot in those kinds of situations just because of the way the opponent plays a little bit more confidently. And he plays knowing that he doesn't have that little ace in the back.
Yeah, the amount of restriction you put on your opponent. Like if you have a half waft, right, and you're above your opponent, they're gonna shield. Like year 3 in the ultimate, they're shielding.
100%.
100%
Yeah.
they're gonna shield. And like when you don't have the waft, 100% you don't know what the fuck they're gonna do, right? Like all of a sudden it's like it's fair game for anyone. Like they might just narrow it out, right? Like who
Yep.
knows what they're gonna do, right? They might go for a parry because they're not too scared of you like empty hop, like up tilting or whatever, right? So there's a lot of things, and it's funny because in Smash 4, even though Wario was a worse character, I think it was a lot easier to use Wario in Smash 4 because it's like you take first stock, you waft second stock. That was the Smash 4 special. Unless it was super campy, then you waft first stock and then you waft second stock if the game was like super campy. But with
Yeah.
Ultimate, it's better that it's a 3-stock game. I think overall for Wario, I think that's just better. But there's so many little intricacies and halfway points, right, and stuff like that. Like, oh, they're at 90. Like for
Yeah.
me, I'm always in the boat with Wario, and this is not always correct, but like, dude, I always say like, fuck it, rip the waft, right? Because the thing about
That's how I feel too.
it's like
Yeah.
the waft out of half waft out of shield is a frame 8 option, right? Like that's a fox
Yeah.
up smash out of shield, buddy. That's quick. That's really fucking
Yeah.
fast. So even using it more like out of shield and not like tunneling it on the punish, and more like, oh, they're at 90. Like I'm gonna get rewarded for run up shielding here, and like altering my position with the defensive option. They swung, boom, push the trigger, boom, take the stock. All right, now they feel even more pressure to approach me because I'm ticking on that. When you're sitting on a full waft, you don't pressure your opponent. Your opponent does not care.
At all.
If a full
Yeah.
waft Wario's timing me out, I don't care at all. You're not.
That's probably the
gaining
worst
anything.
thing.
You're not gaining anything.
Like,
And the waft
Wario went
shit.
for Waft.
The
Yeah.
waft sucks. It's
Yeah,
like not
very
even a good
bad.
waft, right? So it's like I'm not scared of the current waft you have, because unless you hit a falling up area, like you're probably not comboing me into that waft, right? It's very hard to combo in a full waft.
Yeah,
So it's like you
pretty
have
much.
a shittier version and you're not gaining a better version. So, but there's a lot of context to that. That's the hardest thing about Wario, and like
Extremely.
it's like the PT effect, right? Like Pokemon Trainer, it's like really hard to weave in between 3 characters at any given moment. When to use it defensively, when to use it offensively, right? Like even Waft, you can use it defensively, offensively. Maybe you save the Waft for edge guarding instead of comboing against like Spaceys, like Fox or something like that. Burn the double jump with like, or hit the illusion to ledge with like a lingering area like Nair or whatever. Force a Fire Fox, drop down Waft, kill him at 60 or 70, but you didn't combo into it or whatever, right? Like there is so much more to be explored in the Wario meta, I feel, because the character is so deep and so hard to use, and the way you play him differs so much in matchups, because he's not a character that relies on like, oh, I'm Mithra, so I have insane movement plus insane broken ranged aerials. So like I generally can, like, I'm not gonna say Pyramithra plays the matchup the same against most characters, but like it's definitely, the gap is way big against like Wario versus Mithra. Like how you're gonna play Nutra different
Yeah.
character to character, because Wario like solely relies on air mobility and not even grounded speed. You have to mix grounded speed into it because you got to play on the ground, but like your tool is air mobility, and there's so many different ways to maneuver in the air, right? So it's like you got to play so many matchups so differently, and then you also have Waft on top of that. And like, how do you use Waft in the matchup? Is a frame 8 out of shield like really good against this character? Like some characters, like I think like a lot of Pyra's stuff is like -9 or like just enough for like Fox to get an up smash on shield, right? So then you can kind of like play it around that. It's like there's so much more growth for the Wario meta, but it's so hard, and there's only like, at least that character has a top level representation. Like not all characters have that, right? So at least they has that, but like most other top level representations of said character, you're usually on the island alone and you're just trying to like figure it out by yourself. But I'm glad that Gluto is starting, or like not starting, but like he has help he can reach out to, right? Like I know Ramses, you said you've coached him before. Snorly, you said you've helped him out before as well, right? And Tony sent him notes. Like that's super sick, and I'm glad that Gluto is very willing to hear other people's perspective on the game to like pretty much jumpstart
Yes.
his journey kind of thing, so it can kind of like not only rely on experience kind of deal.
I think one
Yeah,
thing that's
that's the-
interesting. Oh, go ahead,
Right.
Snorly. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I was just adding on to it. So that's the curse of the character, right? Like you said, with all these intricacies, it always makes the warrior player think that maybe it's me. Maybe I could have done better because all these situations, those minor, like, oh, I could have done this better. I could have spaced snare better. Why did I just wait to bait him out? It makes it very hard for warrior mates to drop him. Adding on to what you were saying with Waft, I knew there was a mid-level warrior who legitimately told me that full off was so much more annoying and hard to land that he would rather go for a hard read with full off, like on an opponent jump or a roll, so he could go back and charge half off because he felt stronger. And that's another way to think about the character at all. And I was just adding on to what you were saying because I was agreeing with it. But
Yeah,
go ahead, Ramses.
I think the two things that always give the most depth in Smash Ultimate specifically are space related mechanics, which for Wario I think his air drift is exceptional enough to be counted as a unique mechanic, but something like float would be relevant as well. And resource management. So for Wario, having both is just like it just adds a huge amount of depth. But if you look at like all the more complex characters, like Peach has a space related mechanic that's also a resource. Shulk is managing multiple resources on timers. Wario is managing his resource. Joker's entire game plan revolves around how he controls space because naturally he's not amazing at it, but his movement kind of opens a lot of that up. A character like Olimar is managing resources all the time. So in that sense, I totally get what you're saying, Snorly. I feel like that feeling of like I can push my character a little bit further than this.
Yeah.
It's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing and a curse for real. But
That's
I think
why
in
we see a lot
Glutonny's
more character
case,
specialists in this game too.
yeah, true. I think in Glutonny's case is more of a blessing than a curse though, because it's what gives him confidence. I think at the moment, the thing that is the biggest curse for him is the feeling that he's behind in the meta, like we talked about before, right? So yeah, again, I really hope that he's gonna make the big break because I feel like you said yourself, Snorley, like he's gotten better at understanding concepts and understanding the game on a theoretical level. And like I said myself, it's like the way Glutonny understands things once he has experienced them is, in my opinion, on like a very deep level. I think the things that he understands, like he has a very thorough understanding of the things that he is focusing on. So in that sense, it's all. Let's put it this way: it's just a matter of time before he gets there. But when he does, I think he's gonna establish himself as, and this might be bold, but I think he'll establish himself as probably a top 3 player in the world.
Yeah, I mean back to where he
think
used
so,
to be,
too.
right? Like in my opinion, he was clearly like top 5 for sure, but like the 3rd place at Evo was huge. And everyone's got to realize the most competitive year of Ultimate was year 1. Everyone put the
Year
most
one.
amount of time into it. Like
True.
you're able to get that,
Yeah.
and he was consistently placing in like so much of the top 8s, top 3s. Like when Gluto understands something, it's like to a extremely deep level. And
Yep.
I don't even think he's like we say he's like behind, but he's not that behind, right? It's not like he's like
No, he's not.
completely like
No,
falling off.
at,
Like
at all.
he's still like he like to me he's like placing like maybe like 4 places higher than I usually put him like at some of these tournaments, right? Like at main stage I thought he was gonna place top 3, top, you know what I mean, stuff like that. So
Right.
stuff
It's just
like
at
that.
like that top level, it's just like the small pieces that he's missing lead to such huge consequences that it feels like he's further behind than he really is. Because like you said,
Yeah,
it's
then
just
he's
it's the
yeah.
small things, but once he has those under control, he's gonna be the same old monster as he's always been.
Well,
And he was trying to. I was just gonna say he was trying to make up for it recently with all the tournaments that were coming up before the Omicron variant came out for COVID. He went to CEO. He went to Mexico after that. Then came back for Smash World Tour, and he had told me that he was planning for January to stay in the U.S. for like 3 weeks to a month because he was gonna go to Glitch, Genesis. So he wanted to do what you guys were saying, which is pretty much not move here, but at least stay here as long as possible. Yeah, to make up like that difference.
Yeah.
But once your Micron got announced, that kind of shut up on the whole January plan and the process of redoing that. Sorry about that, Tony. Go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. I was going to bring it back to a point that I believe Ramses made earlier about Wario's disadvantage and segue that also into Charles' reference to how the meta is developing. And I wanted to specifically talk about how two recurring matchups that Wario struggles with that are meta matchups, and both Tweek and Glutonny struggle with these, is like Olimar and Roy. I think characters like that. Something have started doing well is they've started to learn that there's kind of like a 50-50 on Wario's high recoveries and biking, that usually if he's biking toward you, you can kind of jump out there, swing high, and he can't really hit you directly for it on reaction. So people are just committing to like bike reads, and then usually what Wario can do is he can just bike away from the stage, get some height and an extra jump, except then he can't drift all the way to center, and so you can bully him into the corner instead of being able to just drift to center. And that's something new we started to see. Something else is I think people have started to make assumptions when they're juggling Wario. So you'll see like higher level players, they'll just always assume that there's going to be a fast fall. They'll put out their own like disjointed KOing up airs, assuming the fast fall. They'll fast fall down, then they'll put out another up air or whichever aerial to respond to whatever he did. And then because he is stubby and doesn't have a wide burst from his landings, they usually get a third attack that's going to be safe and retreating. And then all of these characters tend to also outrange Wario in neutral. So then they get to just go back to bullying him in the first place. So they essentially get to roll dice to hit Wario 4 times for every single time he has to recover. And so even though you're going to see him, Glutonny in particular, still recover through, and Tweek is also extremely good about this, weaving through and reading what the opponent is trying to swing at, what you have is Wario isn't winning. So people tend to look at it as, oh yeah, Wario didn't get hit. Yeah, but there was a chance for him to get hit, and there was no chance for him to hit them. And so you're seeing people start to load their dice more against Wario. And those are the characters and matchups that both players tend to struggle. I know Tweek also struggles against those characters kind of independently of Wario, but Glutonny also struggles with that, and I don't think it's a coincidence.
Yeah. And I'm
Interesting.
Agree with that about Olimar, and I think Palu does that really well, surprisingly. Like with Nair covering a specific height and then landing and then that. And if the air dodge to it, you dash attack on landing or dash grab and start it over, like, which is insane. But for Roy, I'm a little bit more skeptical because I actually, like, me and Gluto, we actually think Wario beats Roy. Like it's one of the few like top tier matchups. I think Roy and Wolf that we think Wario like beats like on a convincing level at least. Like
is this discussion post? Is that post playing against Cola or was that before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, after we reviewed the Cola set, he said that if you play Cola, he doesn't think he'll lose again. He said like that was the first time somebody was punishing his consistent. You know the air drift that Gluto does, where he goes in and then fade away back out, neutral air dodge, like which Snorly definitely pointed out when he gave Goblin those notes. He said that was the first time somebody was punishing those air dodging since MKLeo. So like you could see where like that was like a shock for him because he was like, and the loss to Cola was still like I think was it 3-2-3-1 or 3-1-3-1?
3-1-3-2, I think.
Yeah. So even while like he was like being figured out, he was still like fighting his way back with lack of information. And that night he was down about it, but when he woke up the next day, he told me he was looking at the set. And he said he also mentioned the thing that Tony mentioned because you don't remember we had that talk with him after that, Tony. He said that like he glad that he found out about it because he didn't know those things were able to get punished as hard, like with the waiting for the rising fair punish with neutral air and the air dodge thing. And he said that like you feel like if he gets put in the situation now because he knows about it now, he doesn't think he'll lose to Cola anymore, or at least anymore. Because I've seen in the past he's beaten the Flo multiple times, and he had clean slate against Goblin. I think they played like 5-6 sets. If you count money matches, 8 sets, and I think he's only dropped 2 games against Goblin ever. So he's very confident in the Roy matchup. So I do agree about that with Olimar and Palu with the with fucking up Warrior really bad for that with like the rolling the dice thing because they can do it safely. And like you said, Warrior doesn't win because Warrior either gets away safe or we're back in neutral, or Warrior gets hit, which is a bad thing for him. So it feels like a loser situation a little bit when you think about it.
I think what
So
Tony's even saying is like if you reset to neutral, Wario's cornered even. So yeah, like I get the dynamic.
Yeah. I do agree with the
yeah.
idea. It's just Roy is iffy about that, but that comes from like our perception of the game at that point, and I don't think it's any right or wrong. It just comes down to how we view the game.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's a lot that goes into that rematch too, because you also have to consider Glutonny played against Cola late at night on a jet lag. So
Yeah.
people forget how much these international players are traveling. Like their body's rhythms are different. They're not playing their A game anytime that you see them. That's part of the reason why MKLeo is as impressive as he is. He's never playing his A game when he's dominating these world class players. The other thing is that I do think Glutonny is going to do better, but we're also going to see Cola doing better. Like Cola is still getting that experience advantage. I know both Moxie and Zamba have been down grinding in Cola's region. Sean from Florida has traveled over there, has been grinding in Cola's region. So he's essentially having a regional or out of state level event almost every single day.
Almost. Yeah, it's pretty insane.
Yeah, so Cola currently is improving from where he already was, and I'd say Cola is currently top 5 in North America, inarguably from results, but just right now, in my opinion, I'd say he's top 5 in North America and improving significantly. So I'm very much interested in that rematch, and I wouldn't be surprised if Glutonny did win in the rematch. It's just my perception of how the meta has changed. And I was using Roy as an example, but I actually was thinking of Chag's Palu the whole time, to be honest.
Yeah.
So.
All right, so
yeah, that'll definitely be a very enticing rematch.
So I guess we'll just do closing statements. Obviously, with the summit coming around the corner and Gluto being invited, thank goodness. I guess we'll just go around the table. Just closing thoughts on Gluto's growth and like how well do you think he'll do at Summit and for like predictions and stuff. I can start off. For me, I think Gluto is a player that really wants to win. He reaches out to a lot of people. He's trying to study the game more. He's already studied the game a ton before, and he's even studying even more now that the results aren't as like to his liking kind of deal. So you can tell, I can definitely tell the work is going, like work has been going incredibly like hard in the paint, and he's even going harder for Summit. And for me, I feel like he'll at least get top 5, and like cherry on top, if he can figure out Aegis, then he'll like free top 3. If he can get down the Aegis matchup, which I think is really tough. I don't know what his opinion on the Aegis matchup is.
I don't enjoy the matchup. He did it before, but after he came back from Mexico and playing in Kileo's Aegis, he became really confident in it. So I hope that it's not just a thing. I don't believe in that matchup at all. I'm on your page with that, Charles. I think Aegis fucks Wario sideways. Like I think it's bad.
You just gotta play the fuck out.
Yeah, you have to work so much harder. Yeah, like it's. But he's a believer in it. Like he doesn't think we're a win or anything, but he think it's doable to the point where like he shouldn't struggle too much, Like
doesn't need a
so. I hope exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so if he can do well in the Aegis matchup, I think it's a free top 3 for him. And I think like just from what I'm hearing, he's been working on his ground game, which I think was like the biggest thing for him. So I think he's going to be super prepared for Summit. And the great thing about Summit too is all the players have to come in really early for media day. So like we said before, a lot of these tournament environments, you're flying in Thursday night, you're competing Friday morning, right? Summit is a very different environment. First off, it's an invitational, a lot more chill. Not gonna have huge crowds of people behind you, and the experience is it's like night and day in terms of tournament experience. And you come in like Tuesday, the media day, Wednesday, like stuff like that. So I think he'll have a good amount of time to just be like, no jet lag, or at least like minimize it and stuff like that. So I'm very confident that Gluto, like if I had to make a prediction, I think top 5, and then if he can fuck Aegis up, then top 3 easy.
I personally think I'm gonna agree with you, Charles. I think the most important factor is the ages matchup. If he can get that down, he's gonna do amazingly. If it's gonna be one of those situations where, hey, he's been grinding with MK Leo, but the way Spargo or whoever plays ages is different, that could be like a surprise factor as well. I I don't want to make predictions in terms of placements because I think Glutonny has been a little bit all over the place.
Okay.
I think he has the potential to literally get all the way to the win because I've seen his games against MK Leo. Now, fair enough, it's like friendlies on stream, but I think friendlies, well, they're not like a steady result. They are an indication, and based on the indication, I can definitely see that Glutonny has it in him to beat even MK Leo. So he can get first. He can also just get a bad bracket and do a lot worse than we expect him to. I think skill wise. He can do it all. Again, Age's matchup is going to probably be the biggest thing because if the last summon was anything to go by, you're going to have to fight a lot of Ages to get to that #1 spot.
I wanted to ask before answering. Do you guys remember who was invited to Summit at all, or no? I think
know-
Shuton and T was there.
So the two Japanese players are Proto and T this time.
Oh,
Those are the two Japanese players. Gluto is the one European player, and then Light is going to be there. It's top 8 from main stage. So top 8 of main stage.
Right.
So Chag. So in terms of Wario matchups, we're looking at 2 Aegis, Apollo, no Olimar, Lucina Min Min,
there's the Buzz.
Pac-Man. The Buzz is invited. Yeah, the Buzz will be there. So Rosa. I mean, for the
That is
most part, I feel
disturbing.
like most Wario brackets is not like a Wario player is probably not going to look at a bracket and be like, "Oh, look at all those winning matchups." Yeah, like
it's always annoying. That gives you a better perspective.
Elegant is going to be there. That's going to be
will be
interesting.
there.
Okay.
Yes.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah.
I guess I'll say for closing statement, I think he'll do well at Summit for the sole fact that, like how we mentioned, he's an experience-based player. Being there early
And
is
grinding,
gonna
yeah.
let him play a lot of these
Yeah.
people, and that's gonna help him do really well. But if I had to worry about something, I think Olimar has always been an iffy thing. I don't think he has experience at all against Min. So I'm looking forward to see how he'll do against Proto or the Buzz Min. If the Buzz were to switch, I'm pretty sure the Buzz would go Olimar though. So if I had to put a placing under it, I would say 4th or 5th if we're being optimistic, looking at bracket. But I could see it like Ramses says, I could see it go either higher or lower because his potential is just there, And having that experience of a week being there early will definitely play a role in that.
So for me personally, I guess I'm just being a contrarian. I can definitely see Gluto not making it into the top 8 of Summit. Not because he is not one of the best players there, but because I think that a lot of the players who are going to be there are either people who have traditionally been a thorn in his side or are specifically practiced for Wario. People tend to forget because we certainly haven't mentioned any Japanese Warios in this conversation.
Oh,
but that character was
boy.
absolutely infesting the Japanese meta for quite some time.
Yeah.
That was an arc. That was
Jesus
a fucking
Christ.
arc.
Japan loves
The
Wario.
patch changed it a lot, but before the patch, Wario was arguably the most relevant character in Japan.
Yeah, by
Yeah.
far.
Yeah.
If you
Not even
consider everyone's
arguably.
pockets,
Not
yeah,
even arguably.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not even debatable, yeah.
by far.
So he is just he was one of the most powerful pocket characters in the Asian meta, I would say, overall. He did well in Korea as well, if I remember correctly. The point that I'm getting at here, though, is that these players did not lose their matchup experience or understanding of the matchup concept with that. And these aren't aggro, get up in your face, and they aren't playing characters that are unnaturally floaty, because Gluto tends to be good at those matchups. These are going to be runaway, keep away disjoint characters that like to bully Wario. He just recently lost to Mr. E's Lucina, which granted is going to play extremely different from Protos. I don't think Min Min is going to be relevant at Summit, just because 100% of the relevant top level min-mins are very sour on the character. So I think that they're all going to gravitate toward their other characters they know. Olimar obviously is always on the table, and Glutonny can beat Myron, not Shuton and not the Buzz. Yeah.
I mean, to be fair, in his
Yeah,
recent setting
mine
as
is more of a
Shuton,
player
he was showing a lot of good interactions, but he also kind of, I don't want to call it janked, but he did find himself on the unfortunate end of a lot of situations, like a purple side B on his recovery at like 10 and he dies. But I agree, he hasn't beaten Shuton yet, but I
Definitely
think
possible.
saying, it's not in the cards is a little bit dishonest.
Yeah, it's a matter of just looking at the data. Like, what are the facts that we
Yeah,
have?
I agree. I agree on
Yeah.
that point entirely. Yeah.
So, and then like the people I didn't mention are basically the players who are actually better than Glutonny. So you have like MK Leo, Spargo, and those are going to both be uphill climbs because at the end of the day, both of them have like something in the back pocket for Glutonny, and that they have Aegis, they have other matchups that aren't very common in Europe. Yeah, exactly. So they always have something. MKLeo has a nuclear option for everyone at some point.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure he just is familiar enough with the top level meta that he can pull out a secondary that's going to annihilate whichever player he's against. Just because
We've been
of
talking about corn lately, so we'll see at some.
The MK Leo Greninja?
yeah, people joke, but it's still
His
there.
Greninja's
Like,
sick. Yeah, I agree. It's probably one of the best in the world.
when was the last time you were thinking, I sure hope MK Leo doesn't pull out his Lucario right now? Like the point I'm getting at though is that it's entirely based on how that goes. I will say that I think, much like everybody else here, that Glutonny's performance is going to be based on his knowledge acquisition the week of. Now, usually this takes a lot of time to crystallize. In this particular case, Glutonny is a very mercenary player in terms of he does not look down his nose at you whatsoever. If he thinks you might have information that he can learn from, he'll ask you. He's interested in learning. He's not arrogant. He is very learning focused, and that is a wall that a lot of top players, even top 10 players, run into. Is they think they know best and they don't want to hear criticism from other people. Glutonny will hear anyone who wants to give it to him as long as he believes that they do have a credible opinion. And so he'll hear it out, learn from it, take what he can.
Agree.
And so I think he's going to learn from every single player who is there at Summit. So I think he's going to improve significantly. I just think that the bracket and the matchups both are stacked against him.
I'm glad you mentioned that part.
Yeah.
Because I remember before he's won a tournament in Europe, and he even messaged me and he was like, "Oh, if you ever come by this set, let me know if you saw anything that I could have changed." Even though he won and he was throwing everybody, and I'm like, "You're still looking to improve even after winning." And I'm like, one stop point would have been like, "Okay, I own the region, I win." Like what is there to learn? But
he's also just a really smart guy. Like he has I'm pretty sure he has a degree in like a mathematics related field. Which
I think it's statistics. Yeah,
statistics. That's not easy to get a degree in. But like that just goes to show he's just an intelligent guy. Which if you can say a lot about like talent and whether it exists or not, but like intelligence is probably like the most widely accepted form of talent that you cannot get around, and he's intelligent.
Yeah, I always say if you're a higher top level player, getting that, like, if you can't like compete in Summit, getting the pass and just going there to grind is probably the best like bang for your buck in terms of practice. Obviously, it's pretty pricey, so if you can afford it or not, right? But nonetheless,
I was thinking about doing it just to watch it up close, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, even just like the friendlies you can play there too is really sick.
Yeah,
wild, yeah.
Sick.
I'll do it for the next one.
Hell yeah, and you get 3,000 votes, so that's cool. So,
hey.
But that'll do it for us. A little longer episode, but I think this topic was a lot of us were passionate about it, so we ended up talking a lot about it. But yeah, had a good time. I hope you guys learned a lot about Gluto, his past, his present, hopefully his future, and as well as the Wario meta. But that'll be it. Until next time, class dismissed.
Peace.